Hi there, Phil again. So this is tip 10.3, pest barriers in the garden. Now pests and diseases can be a real problem when you're growing crops, particularly fruit and vegetables. However, if you can put a barrier between the pests and the crop so that they never access it, the result can actually be quite magical, as with this tomato house that I have here, because I never have the slightest problem with any insect, pests or other creatures such as slugs. So there are various different sizes of pests, from larger ones such as animals, which actually includes cats and also birds. Then there's insect-sized creatures, and then finally there's diseases such as fungus and bacteria. Now it's very difficult to keep the latter out, however it is possible to keep out the larger animals and also the insects. In this tip I'll be working my way through from smaller cloche-like structures up through walk-in structures such as this one here, and also I'll discuss a couple of innovative methods that you might like to think about if you're considering pest barriers for the garden. Now there are various folk remedies that people sometimes suggest to try and avoid pests attacking gardens, such as putting coffee grounds or broken eggshells around a crop to stop snails getting at them. But I've never seen any research that suggests that this is actually effective. If you have used one of these methods and you found it to be effective, then feel free to put a comment in the comments section below, and I'll be interested in that and I can respond. Firstly, I make simple covers for seedlings, simply by cutting wire netting into a hoop shape and putting them over newly planted seeds, in this case beetroot. This prevents birds and cats from disturbing the seeds. You can buy similar structures at garden stores, often with a plastic covering for early season crops. A simple and effective method for protecting developing and maturing crops is using cloche structures, usually hoops with ends pushed into the ground and draped with bird or insect netting. Various commercial systems are available, or you can easily make your own, constructing hoops from PVC or alkathene pipe or galvanized steel. These can be effective in keeping birds from attacking strawberries or white butterfly from brassicas. Keeping the edges of the netting tight to the edge is vital for outwitting these wily critters. Sometimes it is possible to simply spread bird netting over small trees, such as this young pear tree, or draped over a fence behind cane fruit, such as these raspberries, or as I've used over my grapevine here. However, developing robust structures which can protect larger crops that you need to walk into can be difficult to make effective and expensive and sometimes high maintenance. So I'll be discussing a couple of methods here of structures that you can create that can be relatively low cost yet still effective. Putting a bit of thought and creativity into designing these structures can work wonders in the long term. For example, pulling bird netting over a large tree can be a real hassle and very difficult. However, this year I had the privilege of visiting the property of Chris and Kev, who have a range of innovative systems at their property. Kev erects 6-metre PVC hoops over the trees, putting the ends over short lengths of rebar to keep them in position. He then drags the netting over the top using a long-handled mop to shove it over the awkward bits. A lot of whippy twigs get pulled flat in the process. Once the netting is in place, the PVC lengths can be removed and stored. Bird netting comes in widths up to 10 metres, so it can cover a fair-sized tree. Kev is diligent about training and pruning to trees to keep them within the required size. You would need to be diligent about removing the netting as soon as cropping is completed. Once twigs have grown through the netting, it would be almost impossible to remove. Chris and Kev also have an area comprised of circular gardens of identical size. Kev has made portable cloche-like frames of PVC pipe and bird netting. These can be moved around the beds as required. One of these frames is an enclosure for their hens. When a vegetable bed has been harvested, the hen run can be lifted onto the plot. The hens are ideal for eliminating insect pests, scratching over the crop remnants, cultivating the soil and adding premium fertilizer. The system also prevents the hens from migrating into neighbouring plots which contain producing crops where they would create mayhem. Chris and Kev's berry house shows how bird netting requires a minimum of structure to support it. My friend Mark, with an organic food trust, has an even more economical structure at the trust site. The framework for his structure is formed from lengths of giant bamboo sourced from nearby gardens. The bamboo is cable tied to steel star pickets or T-posts or Y-posts depending on your country, as bamboo isn't durable in the ground. Cut off soft drink bottles fit snugly over the tops of the stems, preventing rain from entering them and causing rot. This berry house has been in place for a number of years, requiring minimal maintenance. In my own garden, I built the tunnel house behind me over one of my raised beds and covered it with insect netting. I made sure that the framework fitted snugly over the tops of the bed and ensured that the door fitted properly, tightly. My main objective was to avoid attack from a range of destructive insects. This has been successful, and I've had the added benefit of suffering zero problems with other pests such as snails. The mesh even seems to reduce the risk of fungal disease, although I'm sure that wouldn't be a claim that the manufacturers would make. I can also safely leave the fruits on the vine until fully ripe without risk of attack by blackbird. Nothing beats the taste of fully vine-ripened tomatoes. One risk is that there is zero chance of beneficial predators and parasitoids, such as ladybirds entering the enclosure. Therefore, any incursion by a pest would rapidly lead to massive infestation. Another potential drawback is the lack of pollinating insects. However, I have found that the pollination that I get through wind movement and by tapping the flower trusses is perfectly adequate. Another barrier, and one that surprises visitors to my gardens, is my raised beds themselves. One of the biggest pests of carrots is the rust fly, which mines into the roots and makes them inedible. However, the adult flies can only fly weakly, supposedly to only about 50 centimetres, that is about 18 inches or so, above the ground. This is the height of my beds. As a result, I've never experienced any problems with the rust fly. I do rotate my sowings around the beds as an added precaution. I also mound the soil slightly over the shoulders of the carrots to reduce the risk of any stray rust flies mining into the roots. So that's it for this tip. Do feel free to offer suggestions on the comments section below, and I hope you've got some benefit out of this. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so that you're sure to see other tips as they become available, and also like this tip. And also, of course, thanks very much for watching this through to the end.